It's Wednesday, December 13th. This is a pre-opening SPY report, a little over a half hour to go before the open, and the futures had a very positive reaction to the CPI data. You can see here between the blue lines, that's now the pre-market range. We were kind of hovering near the top of yesterday's green bar with a little bit of an up bias before the number, and then boom, the Dow future shot up like 1,000 points real quickly. On the 1 minute chart, you can see that the futures were kind of grinding up a little bit ahead of the number, and then once it hit on the 1 minute chart, boom, big move up. We kind of backed off a little bit, and now we're just kind of hovering near the high. So you're going to have a big gap up today. And that's sometimes tricky to know how much momentum you're going to get, back towards at least this blue line to start, and then see if we can follow through higher. But we'll go over more of the context now and the bigger picture of what's developing. And you have to, even today, if we sell off a little bit first, because anytime you're in a gap like this, let's say your gap, let's look at the daily chart, we're somewhere up here, we're going to gap big, we're going to have a big inefficient pricing here that doesn't necessarily immediately get filled in, but it also doesn't mean you get immediate momentum either. Maybe most of the momentum took place at the pre-market, but nevertheless, just given the overall way I look at things, unless you're below the midpoint of the prior day and heading lower, you can't have any negative bias. And the question is, are you going to get a green move right out of the gates back towards these pre-market highs, or are you going to maybe get a red to green kind of move at some point during the day? The interesting thing is we're taking out a whole bunch of levels that were marked ahead of time, and that's technically broadening action back to the upside. So it doesn't mean that immediately you're going to fail, but it does mean you could pause up in these areas. So what's happening, let's say we open up, if you can look at the right now we're somewhere up here near this purple line, which is the line that turns the monthly chart back to green. This yellow line was the first target. If we go back on the weekly chart, well, more on the monthly chart, once we went two up here, once we had the hammer bar here and then two up on this month was projecting right here to start, and we're kind of hitting that line as well. So that's the yellow line. Next target is obviously up towards the 4,300 area if we want to continue higher, which we're going to expect until now the monthly chart maybe turns back to red again. So we want to see if we kind of hold above this purple line to keep the monthly chart higher. We've reached this first target here on the month, so it is a kind of a pause area even if we're going to be heading higher. But the continuity now, daily chart's going to be green and up. Daily chart's going to start green. If we kind of go down at the open, we might be red technically, so we're going to want to see a red to green kind of move to make that green. But the weekly chart's going to be green from yesterday's open, and the monthly chart, if we stay above the purple line, is green now with continuity upside. So we got to play the upside. It's just a question of when you have a big gap, do you get the momentum right out of the gates, or do you have to kind of pause a little bit? And again, we have another interest rate number tomorrow, so maybe the market's going to want to digest this a little bit. Who knows? Anyway, play the upside. Look for individual stocks. I was kind of going around the board here, just looking at the stocks I like to follow, and just you're going to have to pick the ones that have targets that have yet to be hit. Like if you could see here, Tesla, not that I'm necessarily looking to trade this to alongside, but you can see here, if this broadened out lower, now this becomes a target to hit to the upside. Stocks like NVIDIA, as I recall, they're gapping up nicely. There's a 200 target in the if I go to the bigger picture on the weekly chart, you can see we're kind of heading, this looks like a nice one because, and I've said this even yesterday when I trade, we're heading up to this 200 area. You can see the stops up here. So you kind of, even though we have a lot of, these are weeks in a row up, you got to kind of know if where you're broadening to and where some of your targets are if you want to trade each stock individually, but you still want to look for the right structure. So anyway, on the SPY today, let's get back to the 15-minute chart. Let's kind of see what kind of opening we get. You got to be biased to the upside. And in terms of the target, you've reached this target area up here, which is, once you got the two up and you saw this pivot machine gun kind of thing on the daily chart, we've reached up here. But typically, if you look at this as a big channel, we could easily extend up much higher. So we're going to have to play the long side, but let's just see, how it develops right from the open.